Welcome to the Raising Values podcast, where the traditional family talks. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You can support the Raising Values podcast through Patreon. Phil and Gillian are behind the mic, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Raising Values. Phil had something. He's like, after you start, I have something I want to ask you, but I'm not telling you. It's a surprise. So
on Matter of Facts, we occasionally do this thing where Andrew and I have to talk about what's in our cup. And since we're constantly sipping coffee, sitting here at the dining room table every show.
Y'all really do this?
Occasionally.
What's in my cup? Not alcohol. What's in y'all's cup is usually alcohol, right?
I just thought it'd be an interesting moment to talk about, like, the fact that that's not coffee, despite what it looks like.
I mean, it is coffee. It's got some coffee in it. It's rise mushroom coffee. It has MCT oil, and it has a chocolate collagen powder, because I'm getting old, and you don't get a face like this naturally. I'm joking. I'm totally joking. But I do take collagen powder in hopes that it helps my ankle, but it has actually helped my skin too. And it has lavender simple syrup because I'm a hippie, and milk, and water, hot water.
The most hippie breakfast drink
It's
I've ever
got
heard
7
of.
different mushrooms in it. It's delicious. It really is. I like it. Everyone who comes over and I'm like, yeah, try my mushroom coffee. And they try it and then they never ask for it again. And that's okay because I like my mushroom coffee. It is one of those things where, I just worked out my new budget because I have a pay raise coming. And so I wanted to... Oh, okay, don't start yet. We're just talking about our coffee steward, so it's okay. Good morning, Nina. It's one of those things where, yes, it is in my it's in my monthly budget to spend. It's $66 for a 2-month supply of my mushroom coffee, and I like it. Now, What's in your cup?
Well, I think this is still bunker beans from Disaster Coffee, green beans that I roasted myself, and most recently, homemade coffee creamer.
Yeah. We're doing really... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But the coffee creamer is what we got off of... what was
the Craftologist?
Craftologist. So
we found a new page.
It's condensed milk, which is like the thick syrupy kind.
Was it condensed or evaporated?
I'm pretty sure it's condensed. I thought.
Okay.
Don't make me get up and go find the can.
I'm not. You're not.
I always get condensed and evaporated milk confused until I pick up the can, and if you shake it and you can't hear it sloshing, that's the stuff I'm thinking of. But
you put it in your snowballs.
Yes.
Yum.
That is condensed milk.
Okay.
So yeah, condensed milk and quarter cup of cocoa powder and 2 cups of, in this case, whole milk, but you can use half and half if you want to, put more milk fat into it. And then to all that, I usually add a reasonable pour of simple syrup that we make here at the house, which is nothing but water and cane sugar. So this is part of that whole journey we've been on about eliminating preservatives and getting rid of just junk in the food. And
I feel like every week we have one more thing that we've either started making at home or totally taken out of our diet because of the chemicals and the preservatives. And I mean, y'all, there is... I won't go into it because I've kind of beaten this dead horse for quite some time on the podcast, but just turn your packages around and look at your ingredients on stuff. It's insane what we've been putting in our bodies. But we found this page on Facebook, and it's called The Craftologist, and what she does is she shows you how to make things at Stuart, you can go back. But she got my coffee start over. She she tells you how to make things at home without using any of the preservatives and the soy lectin and the soy this and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So we've done coffee creamer. Of course, we're still making our own bread, except we have found this one brand of bread that we really, really like. And so we have been buying that and freezing it.
But even that is no preservatives.
Yeah, I think it's got like 6 or 7 ingredients. And,
Yeah.
and that's it. So
as a base rule, if I can pronounce all the ingredients and recognize them as actual food, then I'm pretty okay with it. It's when you get into weird chemical names in the food that I'm like, I'm not sure about this.
yeah, so, well,
But,
good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yours is like a mocha. You made some kind of mocha.
Well, and that's why I said, like, I need to do some more exploring around making our own coffee creamer because, like, I'll drink black coffee, but my preference is for a little bit of cream in it. And I've just got to find something that I can use as kind of like a daily coffee creamer because this stuff is so chocolatey. It's like sipping a Hershey's bar.
Well, you can tweak the recipe,
I know.
Mr. Baker. Don't roll your eyes at me.
I'll roll my eyes at you.
All right, so that is not what this episode is about today. Believe it or not.
But we could talk for like an entire episode at some point about like just our own baking and cooking habits. But we won't.
I'm sure they will totally. They'll tune in droves to watch that one.
They might.
So today's episode, back on where we're supposed to be going, is about boundaries and communicating. Phil has been really, I guess not really into what's been happening with the whole Jonah Hill thing, and we're not going to talk about that in depth, but it did bring up a lot of really good talking points, and we have kind of touched on this subject a few episodes back. And really, this is just going to be kind of an expansion of that one. So, boundaries and communicating. Take it away, Phil.
Yeah, so like what it really boils down to is, and I told Gillian this morning, I really don't want to take a position on like the back and forth in social media between Jonah Hill and his ex-girlfriend Sarah Brady, because by her own admission, a lot of the communication she's been releasing has been kind of, I don't want to use the word censor, it's been curated. She's being selective.
Anything out of Hollywood is curated.
She claims she's doing it so that the stuff that presents him in a worse light doesn't impact his family. I'll give her the benefit of doubt. I don't know. But I always look at situations like that to say that if I'm not confident I have enough information to take a position, I try not to. Mm-hmm. But I do think what we can take a position on is the firestorm debate that's been ignited all across, social media about the nature of setting boundaries and to what degree a man, in this case, has a right to set boundaries in a relationship or attempt to impose limits on the woman's behavior. And it's reignited that whole debate. And honestly, I mean, maybe this is my own perspective, but I see a lot of it really devolving into like, how dare he try to control her, which I find a little bit spurious, to be honest. Because it's like, I think you and I largely agree on this, just based on how we conducted our own, relationship of 18 years and marriage of 15. But like, we both regard this as a mutual relationship, and we regard this as a voluntary relationship. Like nobody handcuffed us together at the altar. Nobody was waiting in the wings with a shotgun to make sure we walked down the aisle.
False information.
Okay. Well, until the shotgun came out, I was free to break it off and leave if I wanted, and vice versa for you. So I guess for me, I always come back to the idea that both parties in a relationship have a right, an absolute right, to set whatever boundaries they have to set to be comfortable being in that relationship. And I don't take a position on what specific boundaries are or are not appropriate. It is simply what boundaries that party in that relationship wants to try to set. And it falls upon the other person to accept or to deny them. So like that's why, as is typical for me, when I look at other relationships, I'm always very much of the mind of, it's not what's right or wrong, it's what's right or wrong for them.
Yeah.
So if they're in if they're in a relationship dynamic where neither has the ability to impose their will upon the other, fine. That maybe that works for them. That doesn't work for me because there's certain behaviors that like you can engage in today in this marriage that I would be immediately very uncomfortable with, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, if I went out to the bar and didn't come home till 3 o'clock in the morning smelling of booze with lipstick on my collar, I'd probably get a frying pan between the eyes.
Or something between the eyes. Something would happen for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yes, I think it is absolutely 100% acceptable for both the man and the woman to set boundaries and to.
Real quick to Stuart's question, just Hollywood people.
Yeah. He asked, who is that? And it's, you know how the media takes stuff like the most dumb personal things that should not even be news and make it newsworthy and blow it up. Well, that's all your, I don't know, maybe not you, obviously not you, but I swear everything in my feed on social media is Jonah Hill, Jonah Hill, Jonah Hill, and it's just like they broke up. Like it's just a relation. When I broke up with someone, it's not blasted. It's just one of those things, Stuart. It's just kind of like, who the hell cares? Nobody cares, but everybody cares. Anyway, what it did is it spurred a conversation between me and Phil, and brought us to today and today's topic. So I hopefully you enjoy it, and I'm sure you will give us your feedback later. I love you, Stuart.
So,
All right, so the first banner that Phil put out there says, what are boundaries and are they healthy or even appropriate? Go for it.
I mean, to me, a boundary is simply a guardrail in a relationship on a person's general behavior. Like it is, for me, a boundary, and boundaries are also sometimes self-imposed. Like, like if you set a boundary for yourself to say, I feel like this would impinge upon my relationship with my spouse, that's a self-imposed boundary. But a boundary is still a guardrail to say, this is where I'm not supposed to go for the health of the relationship in this context. Or it could even be a boundary on like personal finance. It could be a boundary on personal behavior. It could be a boundary on anything. But to me, all a boundary is a guardrail. It's there to... That is when you're driving down like a one-lane highway and there's that yellow line right down the middle that says if you cross over here, bad things might happen. That's what the boundary is. Mm-hmm. It's to stop you from suffering a poor consequence. And in the context of a relationship, I feel like boundaries are not only healthy, I think they're required.
I think even taking it outside of like a relationship with a partner, you have to set boundaries for yourself with regards to anyone that you come in contact with, family, friends, coworkers, friends of friends. Like you have to set these boundaries, and there has to be different levels to these boundaries. And it's not like it's going to be hard to put up with. For me, a boundary being set really just, I can... If it doesn't feel right in my soul, if it gives me some negative energy, if it kind of throws off my energy, whatever, it's definitely something that needs to be discussed with that person, especially if it's with your partner. If you were doing something and okay, let's take, for example, when you started stockpiling ammo and you started stockpiling food and the breastplate showed up and all that stuff, something in my little heart and soul was going, something's going on. What's going on? And it wasn't like I'm just going to keep quiet and see what he's going to do. Hell no. You're doing something. I want to know what the hell you're doing. So we talked about it. And not that wasn't a boundary per se, but I'm just saying, it really did kind of disrupt the energy. Like it made me start to question what's going on. So I think you have to set boundaries just to keep your mental health stable.
Well, and to your point about that specific interaction, like that would have been the appropriate moment if your concern had been the money being spent on it to try to impose boundaries on how much was spent monthly about it. If your concern would have been some of the things coming into the house, that would have been an opportunity to set a boundary and say, I'm okay with this, but this makes me nervous. I mean, to me, boundaries always come back down to the idea that, like, this is, I'm not answering that, Stuart.
No, the money issue never came up in my head. And what was the second thing you said? Whatever the second.
What was being brought into the house? Specific items.
Because of what they were, I was okay with those things being brought in the house. The immediate red flag was, is his mental health okay? Like, did he snap?
It's no worse than it ever was.
Well, I couldn't quite figure out, I'm thinking of current things that have happened to you. What's going on? Why all of a sudden are we seeing this change? And like I said, it wasn't a boundary that you crossed. It was just a
So you're
did my husband snap? That's what it was.
So I had nudged into your comfort zone, in other words.
Yeah, you definitely nudged into my comfort zone.
And I think that's where I see boundaries. In this, I mean, whether you're trying to set, I would encourage people to set boundaries early in a relationship.
Definitely.
And to my credit, like, we had discussions around, like, there's always going to be firearms in the house. It's a like, you and I sat down before we got married and we had some really hard conversations. Not hard, because, like, we ended up agreeing on pretty much everything, but, like, we had some very frank, honest conversations about, these are my non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. I have to have it this way to be in this relationship. It cannot. There were things that there were no compromise on. Things like monogamy, which seems like a no-duh, but in this day and age, for God's sakes, it seems to be a controversial subject.
Yeah.
But, like, monogamy, faithfulness, honesty was paramount. There was going to be no lies, no secrets in this marriage. Mm-hmm. We were going to be very transparent with each other because we knew that if we weren't, it wasn't going to work.
Right.
And we wound up agreeing, I think, on every single thing that either one of us threw down in front of the other and said, I have to have this. We were like, I love that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why our relationship has worked as well as it has for 18 years is, those were, we came to the table with, I would say 99% the same expectations and boundaries from the other.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always happen.
No. A lot of times people get married in Vegas and wake up the next morning and have to figure out who in the world they're married to.
Right.
Proverbially, if not literally.
In this case, even though I said we weren't going to, continue to talk about this case, but in this case, he got into a relationship with someone who was already doing things that he didn't agree with.
Wasn't comfortable with.
Wasn't comfortable with. And then as the relationship continued, he made it apparent to her that he wasn't comfortable with these things. Basically, and so this is my point, my takeaway, is he's asking her to stop being the person she was when they were single, and now that they're together, he wants her to kind of conform a little bit. And I know I'm not the same person that I was when I was 21 and met you. I am. But I don't know.
I would argue, and you and I will have to do this on a separate episode, but, like, I would argue that I'm probably 95% the same grumpy old fart I was at 22 years old.
That is a whole nother episode, so we're not even going to start down that path. But I think that it was really cool and it was really hot for him. He was dating this surfer chick and
younger surfer model.
Yeah. Yes. Surfer model. And that's, I mean, in this day and age, first off, bathing suits don't cover women's bodies. They are literally string at this point. And you have to really try hard to find a bathing suit that's going to cover your whole butt. And I know the women listening to this can agree with me that if you value a little bit of modesty, then bathing suit shopping these days is like where do you even go? You got to go shop in the mall section because you don't want all your tidbits hanging out everywhere. So he's dating someone who basically lives in a bathing suit. She's a surfer. And then she's also a model. And I don't know if you're up to date on what models wear. And it's pretty much the same thing. It's,
Not much.
very little is covered. Very little, as my grandmother used to say, very little is left to the imagination. And you can't go to that person and say, hey, I want to date you. And then you kind of get into a relationship with them and they're like, you know what? I kind of don't like this. I really don't feel comfortable with this. Well, dude, this is me. This is who you were attracted to. You can't come back and say you have to change all this. So that's where I do think that he was wrong in that. Now, her behavior was also not, I don't think she was being truthful and monogamous. I think she's young. She's a young surfer model in Hollywood. Of course she's going to go out and hang out with other men and go to parties with other men and probably lose herself. And I don't want to make speculations, but anyway, she wasn't being fair to him either. And boundaries were obviously not set up at the beginning. And if they were, to me, what I can see, they were totally trampled on if they were.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of my perspective on the whole thing. Admitting that we don't know all the details, and nobody does except for the two of them, and neither one of them's probably ever going to admit all the details. But I feel like there was a step in this relationship missed, where the two of them had the opportunity to sit down and say, these are the things I expect of you. But then I also take the position of like maybe just playing devil's advocate. When they were just dating and it was a casual thing, her behavior didn't concern him. And when he wanted to take it to the step of marriage, he expected her to dial it down a little bit, and she just didn't want to. I don't know, but I would argue that it is foolish to skip the step of setting boundaries early in a relationship. At least, like, if you're casually dating, whatever. I don't necessarily believe in casual dating. I think you are always dating towards a long-term relationship. And if
Unless
you
you
can't,
don't want that.
well, then if
And
that,
I think I think that's where a lot of people these days are going. Like, they're not looking for long-term. They're not looking for,
they're looking for Mr. and
monogamy.
Mrs. right now.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. That is another opportunity to have that conversation early in a relationship, just like you and I did, just like I did with several ex-girlfriends who all got cut loose for one reason or the other, because I always asked, what are you looking for? And if the answer was nothing serious, that was the end of that, because I was looking. I mean, it's not like I was ever, like, I dated a girl and on the first date I was ready to walk down the aisle. But I was always looking at it from through the lens of, if this is not someone that wants a long-term relationship that's going to end in marriage, then I'm not wasting any more of my time with this, because that's what I am ultimately looking for somewhere down the road.
Phil is an old man. He was ready to find Mrs. Right. That was me. At like 19. 19, I wasn't even thinking about marriage.
I've always been an old man.
But then at 21, I was like, yeah, I could marry this guy. I was a little further than that. I was already writing my name out. Gillian Rabelais.
Just to see how it looked.
Yeah. I was smitten.
So, the line between boundaries and expectations and what is abuse and control. Because, like, this has been the narrative around all this, is that I've heard versions of this that say the specific boundaries he's trying to set are abusive and controlling. I've heard the really stupid take on this, which is that any setting of boundaries is abusive and controlling, which I find incredibly, it's a stupid take. It's a cringe take in common social media speak. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think boundaries are a healthy thing, and I think that to take the position that if he tries to set boundaries on her, it's automatically abuse control,
then it has to work in the other direction as well. And if she tries to set boundaries around him, that's also abuse of control. But I never hear it go the other direction. It's always man wrong, not woman wrong.
Well, it's like I told you this morning, when we were discussing today's topic. Anything, I'm not even lying. Anything that a man is involved in, and there's something negative about that whole, whatever, that whole thing, and he's involved in it. It's definitely, if it's in the media or if it's, a big showy event or whatever, the man is always going to be wrong. The man is always going to be misogynistic. He's always going to be patriarchy and, down with feminism. And, he obviously hates women. He obviously hates people, blah, blah, blah. That is just the day and age that we live in, is that if you are a man, a toxic, masculine man, you are the problem.
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, that's fine. And we always joke between the two of us about, Phil is always saying, you like my toxicity, you like my masculinity. And I'm like, yeah, I really do. I love that you are a man, and I love the fact that you are a strong, manly man. And I question women's sanity when they I said it in my head, and I'm trying to think of. I question women's sanity when they prefer a soy boy to a masculine man. A soy boy to a masculine man. I'll say that without laughing. I don't know, and maybe it's just me. I don't know. I tend to be old-fashioned. I am trying to. Right now, I'm trying to get past this whole. Well, not my whole life, but I guess my whole adult life, I've been called a prude. And I don't think I'm a prude. I think I just have standards, and I have boundaries and expectations of people and of myself. And that in a lot of people's viewpoints, especially in today's age, is you're a prude. You mean you don't want to show your butt in a bikini? You don't want to, live a little, I'm not a prude. I like modesty and keeping things to the imagination. And there are certain things in a relationship, especially if it's, sexual or anything like that, that's private. Mm-hmm. That's between me and you and quite possibly my best friend. And, that's it. That's it. What is he laughing at? I don't even know what you're laughing at. Oh, maybe soy boy.
Probably.
Probably soy boy.
No, but I guess to me, I also am very confused by, before we get back to this topic, I'm also very confused by the women that are attracted to men that don't exude masculinity. Because, I know I've heard the argument that, if a man's masculine, he can't show his emotions and he can't be emotionally intelligent, he can't be all these things, and I don't see masculinity being linked to those things. I think that I call that emotional constipation, when you can't demonstrate your emotions, which I know you and I have talked about the fact that, to the average person, I come across as this very kind of cold, closed off,
intimidating,
very, and I'll flatly admit, I can't, sometimes that's by design. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not, but I do believe that as a husband, and a father, my first job is to be the 250-pound angry guard dog on the front porch that makes the rest of the world realize if you cross this family, bad things are going to start to happen.
That people are scared of you.
They should be. Mm-hmm. That's probably for their own benefit more than
Absolutely.
Mine. Absolutely. But at the same time, you've also seen a side of me, and our daughter has, and close friends, very close friends have, that the average person never will, where I am a very open and often a very emotionally vulnerable person, but I don't show that to just everybody. Mm-hmm. So I guess to my point of view, it's I don't see the link between masculinity and all these things that people that claim to hate toxic masculinity claim to hate, because I don't see those two things connected to each other. Mm-hmm. I think it is I think you are perfectly capable of being masculine while still being, when appropriate, a very gentle, very caring,
soft person. I mean,
Yeah, I
You've-
mean, this guy here, you are the biggest damn teddy bear, especially when it comes to, especially when it comes to your daughter. But I tell you what, that big teddy bear will rip your throat out if you come anywhere near her.
well, you did make the assertion quite a while ago that like, because you and I know several other large, angry-looking military veterans, and it's interesting that every one of us has at least one little girl, and every one of us is like the biggest pushover with that little girl.
Yes, you are. You're not that bad.
I've got a target to help her get to by
Yeah.
adulthood, but I'm a lot softer with her than I am almost anybody else except for you.
Yeah. So I don't think, well, okay, abuse and control. I think probably abuse and control comes into it if you've set the boundaries late. Does that make sense? Like, no?
I'm gonna continue your thought, but I'm gonna disagree.
Well, okay. Abuse and control are I see that as something totally different. It's on the opposite end of the spectrum of setting boundaries and expectations. I think boundaries and expectations are healthy, and obviously abuse and control is not healthy.
We agree on that.
Okay, so I guess I don't understand. Your question is what is your question? Where is the line between setting boundaries and I get your question now. I had to read it out loud. I can hardly see it. I need my glasses, but I don't know. So so you talk about it, because I think that's a pretty broad spectrum.
It is, and it's intentional. I think from my
Sure, it was. What's your perspective?
I think my perspective is to what you had just said, that when you try to set boundaries late in the relationship, it borders on abuse and control, or it becomes abusive and controlling. I think it depends, because I could see the argument being made that early in a relationship, when it's fairly casual, when it's not exclusive, having one set of boundaries and expectations, which, because of the casualness of the relationship, wouldn't be very strict. And then as the relationship merges more towards an exclusive relationship or a long-term relationship like marriage, I can see the boundaries and expectations at that point being like, okay, look, if we're going to get married, this and this and this has to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, put it in terms of like personal finance.
Okay.
When you and I were dating, like we knew we were heading towards marriage because we'd had that discussion, but we were dating, our finances were totally separate, we didn't commingle anything. I literally gave negative F's about how you spent your money. Didn't care. Wasn't my problem. You paid your own bills. You made your own money. It was all you. You and I were totally financially separate. Mm-hmm. The moment we moved in together, which was right before we got married, that's when the discussions about personal finance and spending habits really came to a head, because at that point, both of our names were on the lease for the apartment. Both of our names were being conjoined in more and more ways financially. And then once we got married, obviously, everything in this state, for a married couple, everything goes against both parties. So I could see a progression of boundaries being set based on the nature of the relationship. So that's why I say setting these boundaries late, I don't think immediately constitutes abuse and control. So I can understand from the perspective of, we were just casually dating. If you go out with other guys or you're at a party, it's whatever. But if you want to be an exclusive relationship, that I need you to do certain things so that I'm comfortable being in an exclusive relationship with you, because I'm making myself vulnerable. And I'm expecting you to not put yourself in situations where you might have one drink too many and wind up doing things that would upset me. Mm-hmm. I could see that point of view. Where I think abuse and control comes in is, I was about to say something, I'm recanting it immediately. Well, okay, because
you just pulled a me. You just had the conversation in your head, and
had
nobody knows what's going on.
Whole conversation in my melon, talking myself out of it. I think abuse and control come up when the boundaries and the expectations become impossible. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
like if
I can see that.
Like, let's say you're a stay-at-home wife, which you're not, you work, and I work,
And my expectation is, hey, when I come home, like, I expect things around the house to have been taken care of. I expect the house to be clean and kind of kept up. And I expect dinner ready when I get home because I've been out the whole day and you've been here all day. That, I would argue, is probably a reasonable expectation. Now, if I come home and I expect the lawn to be mowed every day and the baseboards to be cleaned every day, and like if I set the expectation so unreasonably high that there's no way you could ever meet it specifically so that I could hold it over your head of you didn't do what I asked you again, that is now abuse and control. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes.
Or if the boundary I'm trying to set for you is something that is so counter to who you are as a person, as an individual, there's no way you can accept it without making yourself miserable or crazy in the process, now we're into the realm of abuse and control. And that very well could be what happened to this couple that spurned this whole conversation. He wanted her to knock off the model partying lifestyle, and that is something that is just so central to who she is. She couldn't give it up or didn't want to give it up, and that's fine. That's why you try to set the boundary. The boundary wasn't going to work. They split up. They went their separate ways. Mm-hmm. But I don't see setting a boundary on the face of it as being abusive and controlling, unless the intent is to put that person in a subservient role where they can never reach that expectation, or attempting to pose a boundary that, like attempting to force a boundary or an expectation the other person just can never comfortably attain. Mm-hmm. And that probably sounds like a very wishy-washy definition.
It makes sense to me. I mean, when you start to look at abuse in a relationship, a lot of times it can be narrowed down to you're asking something of someone that they just can't do. Mm-hmm. And so now you're going to be abusive towards them because they can't do that. What did Stewart say? I see it becoming abusive when they change, especially when they change to lopsided.
I think I understand where Stewart's coming from, and like I said earlier, like I think the
Wait, go back. Go back to
hang on. Go back to.
I just wanted to see what Benjamin said. But you have to move.
Boundaries do change when you move from dating to moving in and getting married.
I agree, and that is something that I said to Phil this morning, is that, as your relationship progresses and your goals change because, you're just dating, whatever, now you're engaged, now you're moving in together, now you're married, those boundaries have to change with the goals. Absolutely. I totally 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Because you're looking for something more.
Now, to Stewart's point, when he says, especially when they change to lopsided, I think what he's suggesting is something very similar to what I've said in the past, which is if I have the right to put expectations on you, but you don't have the right to put expectations on me, we've now entered the abusive, controlling stage. Mm-hmm. Because, like, you and I have had this conversation with other people, and, like, I firmly believe I have every right as your husband to set boundaries and expectations for you. I think that's perfectly fair. I think it's rational. I think it's reasonable. And I think it's healthy. But you have the same right to do to me. Mm-hmm. And you do. You tell me, hey, honey, I think we need to do this. Or, hey, honey, I wish you'd stop doing that. And when you do that, I look at it as my ultimate goal here is I want my wife to be happy because I care about her deeply. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't I acquiesce to those requests she makes upon my behavior to the degree that I am able? Why wouldn't I endeavor to try to accommodate that?
And that's kind of like what we talked about a couple of episodes ago with, if your spouse is asking you to do something or not do something, say for instance, what to wear or whatever, why wouldn't you even take that into consideration? Because that's going to make your husband or your wife or your spouse partner happy. Now, that has to be within, it can't be like totally misguided or wrong. If it's something that, okay, I guess I just need to say what I'm trying to say. If you ask me, honey, I really like the way you look in a thong bikini, and that's what I want you to walk around the house in all day, every day. When we go out, that's what you're going to wear. I'm going to be like, you're effing crazy and you've lost your mind, and absolutely not. But if you come to me and say, look, your boobs are sticking out, your ass is hanging out, your skirt. I really don't feel comfortable with this. I really think you need to do something about it. Me, knowing me, of course I would be like, what are you talking about? Mer, mer, mer. But
That is recorded on the internet, by the way.
mer, mer, mer. That's what Phil sounds like in my head sometimes. Mer, mer, mer.
That's what she sounds like in my head sometimes.
But because I want to make you happy, and because of the relationship that we have, that we've always been so open with one another and able to talk to one another, I would definitely stop and be like, okay, this is obviously something that's bothering him. 21-year-old me probably would not have. 22-year-old me probably would not have. 39-year-old me would be like, okay, something's not right. I'm totally upsetting him, which is making my life a little bit more miserable. I don't want to be miserable. I really don't want him to be miserable. Let's sit down and talk about this. But I think that's where a lot of couples run into that problem, is because they don't set boundaries and expectations in the beginning of the relationship. And the base problem is they don't know how to communicate. And because you've got to master that first. If you want to be with this person, you've got to master communicating with them first, because that's the only way you're going to get across your feelings and your expectations and your goals in this relationship. And then, of course, your boundaries and expectations. So I don't know if it's just because of who you are in the totally masculine, we go back and forth on whether or not you're an alpha or whatever.
I'm absolutely not.
But anyway, you're at a higher stance than a soy boy. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. You're a little bit higher on that scale. And I can be very assertive, and I mean that Sicilian comes out.
I made the assertion a long time ago that on some level it was a little surprising you and I worked out as well as we did, because despite, like, we both have very, I want to say, alpha-ish personalities. Although I think in that weird, like, Venn diagram of human personalities, I think I'm definitely more in the Sigma realm. But anyway, that's another discussion.
Anyway.
But like, you are very assertive. You're very driven, and you're very opinionated, and you're very quick to put your foot down with somebody else on their neck if required and tell them that's not the way things are going to be. But you also, like me, don't feel the need to compete with anybody else. You're very much like you're your own person, and you stand alone. And for that reason, it was interesting to see the two of us get together, because you have two people who, to the rest of the world, are like, take me or leave me. This is who I am. And the two of us just went right together.
Yeah. But I do have to say, because a lot of times I think the way that we talk about our relationship on this show, it comes across like we've had no issues. Like we've always been
like cats and dogs before.
Yin and yang, and we just have the perfect relationship. And y'all, it has taken 18 years of hard work to get to where we are today. Hard work, determination, and a common goal. And neither of us, I don't want to be alone, and I kind of like this guy. So, I have decided to stick it out with him and to work through things. And I think that is where our culture today falls short, and our relationships take the
easy way out.
Well, yeah, they take the easy way out, because relationships are hard work, and we've said this before in I don't know how many episodes, but marriage and, all that's, it doesn't have to be just necessarily marriage. If you're just with someone, you don't have to be married to them, whatever. Anyway, it's 100-100. It's not 50-50. It's I have to give you 100% of me. You have to give me 100% of you. And, it's going to vary day to day. I may come home from a really hard day at work, and I still have to finish the day strong, when really all I want to do is just crawl in the bed in the fetal position and sometimes just cry, But I still have to show up for you. I still have to show up for Piper. I still have to show up for this house. I still have to clean. We both work outside of the home, quote unquote. You do work, but you're just in the office. But I don't know, like that's the problem with, I think that's why we see the divorce rate so high nowadays, is because it's easier to just give up and go find another than it is to work on what is broken. Fix what is broken.
Well, and I think part of that is down to like the messaging around relationships, where for the longest time it was always there's somebody out there that's perfect for you, and perfect for you kind of insinuates there's somebody out there that this relationship is going to work 100% of the time without any effort. And that's nonsense.
Well, I mean, as a young girl, we're all fed into this Prince Charming is going to come in and he's going, you're going to be a princess and you're going to have all the things you want and need.
But there was a Disney prince named Philip.
Anyway.
God,
I'm not even. Somebody come get this guy. Stuart, come get him.
The two of us are more like Shrek married the princess, but
Oh, God. Well, she was a princess, but she also became an ogre. Is that what you're saying?
You're not an ogre, though.
That took way too long to respond.
I had an internal conversation.
Anyway, I don't even remember. Phil just called me an ogre princess.
Oh, you.
I don't remember what I was saying now, but anyway, so communication, divorce rate, it's easier to just throw it away than to fix it. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It's because I think it's because it's easier to get rid of it because it's really hard to hear what the other person has to say negative about you. It's really hard that you have to now stand face to face with the things that you've done, you've said, your projection of yourself that has caused someone so much pain and whether it's discomfort or whatever, you've caused someone something negative. And I don't want to face that. I don't want to face that. So I'm just going to run away and go get this divorce. You go do you, boo. I'll go do me. And we'll be done with this,
Well, I think there's a lot of that. And I think also, like, one of the hardest things to hear and accept in a relationship is that you have wounded someone that you care deeply about. And I think that's why communication falls short and doesn't happen a lot of times, because one party doesn't want to hear the communication from the other that you have hurt my feelings. They want to brush it off and say, well, that's not my problem. I didn't do that. I didn't say that. They want to turn it into an argument about how you're wrong rather than acknowledge your feelings are hurt. And I very well may have done something inadvertently to cause that or contribute to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many times did you and I, now I think this is also just difference in the way you and I communicate that took us 18 years to resolve. But like, how many times did you tell me it wasn't what you said, it was your tone?
Oh my God.
And it took, I think, both of us years to kind of unravel. When I'm communicating, I very often do it in a very dispassionate, stoic way. It's about the facts. It's about what happened. The tone is not my focus. My focus is on the words I'm using to communicate the thing I need to communicate, which is completely bass-ackwards from the way you communicate, whereas the word is often less important than the emotion you're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
Which is why all those years we would fight about, you would say something, I'd be like, I didn't say that. And I didn't say that, but that's what you heard because it's the emotion that was communicated. So I was arguing with you over what actually happened, and you were arguing with me over how what happened made you feel. And we did this number around each other. And it took us years to finally figure out, oh, I'm a moron. Her feelings are hurt because she thinks that I don't value her opinion or whatever. And it took you years to figure out he doesn't understand that my feelings are hurt because I am telling him something in a way that it didn't actually happen, which is confusing the hell out of him.
I'm really good at confusing you.
Oh, God. And now there's two of you because our daughter does it too.
But I mean, I don't know. It was almost like you had never had any sort of relationship with a woman before. Like you didn't speak the language, obviously. Like you didn't know how to speak woman.
How many men do speak women?
Well, it took you really, really, a really long time to learn this language. And it was almost like I literally had to beat you over the head all the freaking time to get you to understand the tone in your voice says that you are dismissing what is happening here. Like, we can argue about what was said and what was done and, the semantics of it all day long. But I need you to address that you hurt my feelings. I need you to address that you did something that broke my heart. And which I can remember saying, but you've hurt my feelings, you hurt my feelings. And it just wouldn't penetrate. It was like, knock the thick skull out of the way. I got to get to the brain. How the hell am I going to get to the brain? Because I need him to understand my feelings are hurt. And if he can't understand that my feelings are hurt in this instance, then he's not going to learn it for the next time.
But with that, and I contend that is because earlier on in our arguments, it was because you would say, you said this and it hurt my feelings. And what you said I said is not word for word what I said. And when I corrected you, you went through the ceiling. Because now I was arguing with you about what hurt your feelings. And from my perspective, the problem was like, she's literally putting words in my mouth, and that's not what I said. But the problem was, it wasn't exactly the words word for word I said that upset you. It was the tone I used. And it took us some time to get you to get the words out that it was the tone I used that upset you. And it took me some time to realize it was how I was saying it, not necessarily what I was saying.
Yes.
And that was when I started apologizing. I'm sorry for the way I said that, but I'm not sorry for what I said. Because very often, if I was communicating something with you that I knew was going to be controversial, like I went into it knowing she's going to be aggravated to hear this, she's not going to be happy about it, but the consequences be damned, we have to talk about this. That was very often where that broke down. It didn't matter that the communication was going to result in hurt feelings. The consequence for it not happening was worse. So, how to communicate? Boys, I got news for y'all. When you're communicating with women, the absolute best thing you can do is to walk into it calmly. Don't try to be rational. That's not going to work. Walk into it calmly. Soften your voice.
Yes.
If you're angry, walk away for a minute, cool your jets.
Soft voice, but not condescending.
Yes. Don't bring anger or frustration into the argument if you can.
Patronizing.
Oh, no patronizing.
Don't patronize.
But if you are going to pat your wife, pat her on the butt, not the shoulder. It works better.
Anyway.
But, you have to come in with a neutral tone, and you have to try to understand that depending on the particulars of your spouse's emotions, how you say something, the tone you use may very well heavily color what you're trying to communicate. So if you let that frustration and that anger creep in your voice, it doesn't matter if you're offering her a weekend vacation. She's going to hear the tone being used, and that's going to color the entire engagement. And as far as are there times when communication is not a positive, I don't think so. I think communication is always a net positive. In other words, even when you and I've had to communicate something that was controversial or upsetting, if I communicated it, it's because I believe that not communicating it was worse than communicating it.
Yeah, and what you have to communicate may not be positive. It may be something negative. It may be something that you don't want to discuss or can be viewed as a negative. But I agree. I would much rather you tell me than keep it to yourself and let it fester. Because then once eventually it does come out, it's gonna be worse.
Sometimes my husband talks to me like one of his employees, and I have to remind him that it doesn't fly around here.
That's funny because when we first started dating, I was talked to like I was a cadet. A soldier under...
A private?
Private, whatever. What are they called? I don't know. A private. I was talked to like I was a private. And so that was nipped in the bud quickly. Because when we first got together, Phil had just come home from Iraq. Like literally the day,
And
2 days after he was stateside, we started dating.
And we were together, 6 months before I was on orders again?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was, it took me a while to deprogram myself from the Army.
And knowing who he was at that time and how he spoke to me and sometimes his tone and I understood, I wasn't so stupid and naive at 21 to understand that he was coming home from a really messed up place. I mean, like, it was active war in Iraq when you were there. So I understood that, and you did really good. You got into counseling. You understood what was happening, and you went through a really hard time at the very beginning. Do you mind if I tell why you went into counseling?
Go on ahead.
So besides his attitude when he came home, because, I mean, obviously someone who's been over there wants to come back and I wouldn't say like party it up, but they want to get back into what they left.
Reintegrate into society.
Right. I mean, they've left. Basically, his life stood still for a year in Iraq, and his friends moved on and continued to party and do whatever. And so that was really hard for me because he's home now. I want him home to myself. You don't get to go hang out with your friends all night, and especially girls at the gas station all night. Anyway, so we set those expectations quickly, but he was still battling with night terrors and things like that. And there was one night where he was having a night terror and he punched me in my back. Didn't mean to, but I couldn't breathe. I mean, it was a punch in the back. Anyway, he started counseling, and just like Benjamin said up at the a little bit further up, was our expectations changed then. Like, our expectations and our goals and our boundaries and things like that, those things changed almost immediately at that moment. It was like, okay, we were here, this has happened, now we're here, and now this is what I need from you.
I almost broke up with you.
I know, but I'm glad you didn't.
Well, but in that moment, I was more worried about like what being okay. So being at the time 220 pound combat vet, you kind of make peace with a certain amount of like, I know what I'm capable of doing because of my strength and my training, and I know I could hurt people if I really had it on my mind. And the idea that I could have severely injured my girlfriend in my sleep and not even remembered it scared the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. Like that was one of those moments of, I'm not even safe to be around her when I'm unconscious. So how do I progress this relationship forward if I can't trust myself around her anymore? Right. So my gut reaction was, I have to break up with her. That's the only way to keep her safe from me and keep anybody safe from me.
Wow.
And you talked me out of it, and counseling was started, I want to say 2 or 3 days later.
It was quick. It was. I mean, you were in counseling quick.
I was like gung ho, no BS, no farting around, like just.
Yeah.
This is what's got to get done. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a hard time in my life.
Yeah, that might be a good episode later.
Yeah.
Talk about that. But yeah. So anyway, after reading your comment, Nina, he used to talk to me like I was a private, and that was one of the things I wouldn't say we argued about this, but when we started, after we got married, or even before we got married, because we talked about having a family together before we got married, I was always quick to say, like, we're not raising them like they're in boot camp. Like, our children will not be in boot camp at our house. You remember that?
Oh, yeah. And even that took us a while to, like, I guess, put together what the other person was saying. Because, like, when you would say that, what I was hearing was, we're going to let them run wild and we're not going to stifle their creativity and all this nonsense. And I was like, no, my children will grow up with discipline, because I believe that discipline is like one of the nails that holds an adult life together.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability to self-discipline, you cannot do anything else. Like, I remember having this conversation with you many times about, like, to what degree do we allow Piper to have input into the things surrounding her, or like how much autonomy do we give her at what point? And my point of view was always, the first thing she has to learn how to do is shut up and listen to her parents.
If she can't learn that, I can't teach her anything else. I can't get her to the point of you can pick your own socks, or you can pick your own outfits, or you can decide what you want to do on a Saturday night, or you can decide what job you want or what college you go to. I can't get her to the point of autonomy if I can't first teach her you have to listen to your mother and father. You have to listen to what we say. Like we have to start at a baseline so that I can put you on the path that you're supposed to be on.
Yeah.
And that was I don't want to say a wrestling match. It was something that you and I wrestled over to find where that balance point was. And I think we found it, because to this day, I still to this day get comments from other parents who are so complimentary of how polite Piper is, how well behaved she is, how respectful she is to adult and to authority. And at the same time, you and I both know she questions authority. Like, if somebody tells her, well, this is a rule, and that rule seems stupid to her, she will politely ask that person why. And if that person doesn't give her an answer, she'll come home to you and me, but like, so this is going on and I don't understand this. And she wants to know.
Or she would she would ask the teacher. She'd flat out ask, why is this rule okay for him, but it's not okay for this person? And there were times when I would get phone calls from school from her teacher saying she had an argument with the teacher on the playground. And this is what it was about. It was about a double standard of rules on the playground. And I was like, well, good for her for calling y'all out. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. Like, okay, we'll go get ice cream later. Great job, Pipe. But she is very much Phil in that instance.
Oh,
so.
God, yes. We often debate over...
Joe, you can just turn off the episode now. Go back to where you came from. Joe said wait till she hits her middle teens. Good luck. Pray for us.
Yeah. You and I will always debate over how much of each of the two of us wound up in her, but that is an instance where I see so much of myself in her, because she is like laser focused on the rules making sense, on them being equally applied, and if a rule doesn't make sense, she wants clarification, and if a rule is not being equally applied to her and everybody else, that rule is invalid immediately. Like,
yeah.
she's... And to her credit, though, she does the same thing with me. Like, if there's
she's
a rule,
called us out before.
Yeah, or if there's a rule in the house that doesn't make sense to her, she will ask, why
And
is that?
She's really good about setting up her argument. Like, she's done her research and she's cataloged it in her head, and she can pull out things from months ago and was like, well, you said this 6 months ago, 6 months and 7 days and 21 minutes ago.
Just like a woman.
That's where we're going to end this episode, and I might not have a co-host next week. Oh, gosh.
Anyway, so yeah, I will caveat that this last point with one thing. The one time I think communication can be a negative is if what you're saying in a moment of anger is designed to hurt.
Oh gosh, yeah, that could go back into a whole episode of narcissism, and oh Lord, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down. But I agree. I think if your communication is if it's not designed to prop up and discuss and come to a conclusion together, maybe your conclusion, I mean, it doesn't have to match. It doesn't have to be 100% agreed upon. I guess it does need to be 100% agreed upon, but you've got to be able to, if you're going to communicate something to someone, you have to stand there and listen to what they have to communicate back. It can't be a demand. It can't be well, I said this, now do it kind of thing. That's not even communication. That doesn't, in my head, doesn't classify as communication. Communication is a back and forth of words. That's not what I'm trying to say, but that's what you're going to get today.
No, it makes sense to me. But like I said, the only reason I throw that out there is because, we've always said that hurt people. And I do believe that sometimes when a person's feelings are hurt, rather than try to communicate that hurt and try to, if not resolve it, because sometimes there's nothing to resolve. Sometimes it really is just like I've done that to you where I've been like, hey, this happened. I know you didn't mean to hurt my feelings. I know that wasn't your intent, but I have to get it off my chest just so I can get past it. And you've done the same to me.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between that and you've hurt my feelings, so I'm going to say effed up things to you to hurt your feelings, and then we're going to be even.
Which is how I used to fight. We used to hurt, and that was a learned behavior on my part, and it took a lot of time to realize I was fighting unhealthy. I was communicating in an unhealthy manner, and it didn't matter what our goals were at the end or what we were trying to get across to one another, because the way that I was fighting with you, that took precedent over everything. You know, at that point, it didn't matter what started the fight, but because here we are now, and I'm going to hurt your feelings because you hurt my feelings, and that was a learned behavior.
And the worst part is that kind of hurtful, intentionally hurtful communication stifles positive communication, because you know, you only have to walk face first into that so many times before you start to think to yourself, I just don't want to communicate with this person. And that is the death knell of any relationship, but it's particularly troubling in a marriage.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I had to work the hardest on, especially when it was I'm going to hurt you because you hurt me in our fights, was I am really, really good at now not saying everything that comes to my mind. Like, I mean, you you joke with me all the time that I have conversations in my head, and a lot of times, I'm telling you, I'm gonna be on my own next week. No co-host if you keep up. Somebody come get this man. Oh God. Anyway, I have learned, and it's not just with you and me. It's in casual relationships. It's in work relationships. It's with family, that not everything that comes to your little brain box has to be said. Not everything needs to be said. And a lot of times, because those things that come to your little brain box are not going to help the situation. And so I have to do that little evaluation every time something comes up, and I really want to say it. I really, really want to say it, or I really want to correct you, or I really want or correct that person. Is it worth starting? Is it worth going down that rabbit hole to start that new conversation, or can I just let them say what they need to say? I don't need to answer back right away. I don't need to even answer, really. I can really just say, I hear what you're saying, I understand it, and then whatever. A lot of times if you just repeat what the person just said, so that way they understand, okay, they did hear me. Maybe not understood, but they did hear me.
Well, and what this reminds me of is it's something I told...
Stuart. Oh, Lord have mercy. You
So
can come get him.
This reminds me
wanna
of
see
something
it.
I said a long time ago that I've applied this not just with you, but mostly with you and Piper, to a lesser degree, other relationships, because I have a very, very small, tight circle. But like, I always ask myself if whatever I'm about to communicate with you that is probably going to upset you, if it's worth you being angry at me for a few days. Which isn't to mean that every time I bring something to you, you're angry with me for a few days, but that kind of becomes my litmus test that I dip into the subject and be like, is this a big enough issue that us fighting about it for a couple of days is worse than the consequence of not having the argument? Mm-hmm. So if it's one of those things of like, I want to paint the bedroom blue today, I don't care, not worth fighting about, let her paint the bedroom blue, do whatever. Or I want to move the bricks in the front yard from there to there. Not a big deal. Not worth fighting about. Let her do what she wants to do. Like, so as a default position, I have no opinion because or I'm willing to accommodate you because like there's no point in fighting about it.
So there's a magnet on the fridge that's been up there since we got married, and it says there's 2 ways to keep your wife happy. One, let her think she's having her way, and two, let her have it.
Yeah, and very often that's just my default position. Just let you have your way. It's not worth fighting about. It's not worth arguing about.
Yes.
But
Darn it.
But
Yes.
if the consequence of letting you have your way it reaches a certain point, then I have to have that confrontation with you, no matter how long you're angry at me, because the penalty for not having the disagreement is worse than you being upset with me for a few days. If it's a major thing like where we send Piper to school, which is something you and I are still grappling with, that's something that like I am invested enough in that there is no, oh, I'll let Gillian have her way. Because it's like, no, I have to feel good about that decision too, because that's my child. Or if it was like a major financial decision, like when you and I were car hunting for you. Yeah, I had input in that decision because that was going to affect the financial health of the family for years. So like there are certain topics that the same way you said, like you keep those thoughts in your brain don't necessarily come out. A lot of times for me, it goes through this little filter and it's like, is this worth pissing my wife off? And there's a no where it just kind of goes pooh and disappears, and then there's a yes where it comes out the mouth. So like that's my and that's the best relationship advice I give to anybody in any relationship of any age. Ask yourself, is this worth them being pissed at me for a couple of days? And you'll find that 95% of the time, the answer is no. Let them have their way. It's not worth fighting about. It's not worth arguing about. Just let them do whatever makes them happy. Mm-hmm. And you will find you will argue less. And when you do argue, it'll usually be resolved a hell of a lot faster. Because that person isn't constantly being confronted with the person saying no, 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 and adding into frustration. And when they do say no, your default position will tend to be, okay, we have to bargain. We have to come to an agreement. We have to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just told me no constantly, that was going to be frustrating pretty quickly and vice versa.
Yeah.
Although for you hear no a lot because it's usually tacos and vacations, and my bank accounts would say no. I just have to say no for it.
I live such a hard life.
I know, so abused. But yeah, I guess we'll cap that one off. Like I said, I came into this because it's the thing that's been floating around social media, and I didn't want to take a strong position on the actual hullabaloo in social media because, like, I don't feel like we really know 100% of what's going on. I could see it very much both ways, but I
really don't want to know.
Yeah, but my position tends to be that, like, I believe that setting boundaries and expectations and communicating those boundaries and expectations is a really healthy part of a relationship. And I think that if you don't do that, it is to the detriment of the relationship. And I do believe that as long as the ability to set, y'all have to forgive us if y'all can hear that, our cat is having a complete nuclear meltdown in the other room for some reason.
Probably the door's closed.
Piper shut her door, so the cat is having a conniption fit. But, like, the only time that setting of boundaries becomes problematic is when either one party has no ability to set boundaries and the other one does, or when the boundaries and expectations are something that one party just cannot or will not agree to, which at that point that dissolves the relationship. I mean, that really is a no hard feelings, we're just not meant for each other. Like if you and I would have got together and I'd have been like, I really like monogamy, and you would have been like, I really don't. I'd have been like, okay,
we're done. That's great. Nice to meet you. Have fun.
No hard feelings, but that's a deal breaker. Good luck with life. So like I think that's where the boundaries and expectations thing is. Like it's like I even told you, like certain religions there are expectations put on the wife that she'll be completely covered head to toe. And I'm like, you know what? If that's what he wants and that's what she's comfortable with, then y'all go do y'all. That's not the way we live our relationship. But anyway, that's a lot of words to say that, like, I think as long as expectations and boundaries is a two-way street, it's probably okay.
Yeah. Great ending point there. Well, thanks for watching. Today was a fun one with everyone in the comments. Y'all need to come back and do this again. Thanks for watching or listening, and we will see y'all next week. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye. Y'all.